Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is Tuesday, and that means we are live here at the table. For those of you joining us for the first time and you wonder why would someone call a show The Table? Well, let me tell you, my name is Barbie Winterbottom. I am the CEO and founder of the Business of HR. I have worked in the people and human resources space for over 20 years. And for my entire career, I heard people saying, we want a seat at the table. And for years, I was frustrated because I couldn't understand why so many folks felt as though they could not get that seat. So I decided it was time to build my own table and invite all of you to claim your seat and use your voices and share your stories. Hence the name of this program, The Table. I want to also thank our sponsor, Daily Pay, who we have their logo up there. Daily Pay is a phenomenal partner. And if you have not heard of Daily Pay, I encourage you to check them out. Go to their website, email me, send a carrier pigeon, whatever works. But Daily Pay allows employees to access any earned but unpaid wages at any time through an app on their phone. And it is a very nominal transfer fee. There's no interest involved. There's no clawback. It's not a predatory payday loan. It is you accessing your earned money when you need it immediately. It's a phenomenal benefit. And if you are in the people space and you're looking for an even better, higher elevated attraction and retention tool, or something that will help boost your culture space, I encourage you to reach out to the folks at Daily Pay because it is a game changer of a benefit. I implemented it when I was a CHRO, and I am proud to be a partner with them. With that, I am thrilled today to have the opportunity to introduce my next guest. Tim Sacket. If you don't know who Tim is, you've been missing out. I have been following Tim on LinkedIn for quite some time. And I think I fell in love with his content because of his almost irreverent approach to the work we do, which is so refreshing because what I find is his candor and his approachability is game changing. We can get really lofty when we talk about HR and TA, and we can talk about all of these beautiful altruistic ideas and plans, but Tim brings us right back to reality with what people are dealing with, both as an organization and as folks who are practitioners in the recruiting and TA space. So I am excited, and I am going to bring Tim to the stage right now. Welcome, friend.
Hey, Barbie, how's it going?
It is going well. I'm fidgeting, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to move so much. I decided I would try standing today because typically I sit. And so now I'm like trying to figure out how to make this not look like I'm pacing constantly.
Isn't it? It's funny that I think everybody in the world got a standing desk during the pandemic, and I love mine, but like you go through periods. Like you go like, okay, I'm going to start standing more, and you all of a sudden you're standing like 5 or 6 hours a day, and then they'll go through periods where I won't stand for like 3 straight weeks, right. And I'm like, what's going on?
What's happening? And I find I interviewed Andy Storch a couple weeks ago, and he and I have gotten to be great friends. But anytime he and I chat, he's always moving, he's walking, he's standing, and I'm looking and I'm like, and he's really fit. There's something to this, Barbie. Stand your ass up and use the desk you bought. So here we go.
Yeah, for sure.
A whirl. So Tim, I want to share with everybody, first of all, you have this amazing book. And if you guys have not read it, haven't purchased it, I encourage you to do so. Really great. It's an easy read, which is great. It's not super long. It's not, an encyclopedia version. And it's so practical. And I want to get into that. One quick housekeeping thing is I see we've got some comments coming in already. So excited, friends. The format of this show is that we try to be as interactive as we possibly can be. So if you guys have questions or comments, please share them with us. I will bring them onto the stage, and Tim and I will do our best to address any questions or comments you have. Try to make them as appropriate as possible. Although this conversation in and of itself could go down any number of rabbit holes. So who knows, right? So it's great to see you. Welcome, Hung. Welcome, Dara. Oh my gosh, so good to see your face, girl. You are soaring. And Dara used to work for me, and she's just written a cookbook.
Nice.
She's now she's just flying. So I love it. So congratulations. Some really great folks and a friend. Tracy, welcome. Happy to see you. Jill, happy to see you guys.
Hey
So
Barbie, I was telling you before we got on about Hung Lee and his recruiting brain food. So shout out to Hung, recruiting brain food newsletter. People ask me all the time. They're like, "Oh, what do you read in our industry?" And I'm like, I read Hung. Like I read his because I mean he brings in all of the best content of the week each week, and like it comes out on I think Sunday, and I just love it because I don't have to go and curate my own feed. He does it for me, so it's amazing. So thank you, Hung, for that.
yes, and I am signing up for that today. And Hung, if you want to share with us a link, like write it in the comments, I'll pull it forward so everybody who's watching today live and into perpetuity can click on, or can get that link and they can sign up for your newsletter as well. The more information that has value, the better we are. There's so much information out there today that doesn't have value. So when somebody says you need to read this, I pay attention.
Definitely.
So wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right. So, Tim, share with us a little bit about what got you started in the recruiting TA game and kind of a bit of your background, because you're incredibly qualified. You've got so much amazing experience. And now the work you're doing as more of a consultant versus, working within a specific organization. And then I'd love to know what led you to writing this masterpiece.
It all kind of comes together. So I'll give you like the real quick 2-minute version of my life. So I tell people I was born into recruiting because my mother started a recruiting company when I was around 8 years old.
Okay.
And single mom with 2 kids. I have an older sister, and she would, old school recruiting. She would be at home at night with resumes, calling people, interviewing them, taking notes. And back then it was pre. I've been saying it's not pre ATS. I say we because I own and run the company now, but we had like a green screen kind of database, right? Where she would send out checklists to candidates, like we did technical engineering folks, still do. And they would have to fill out these questionnaires, like, checklists of skills. And then we'd send them back and somebody would put these skills in, and then we would never use it. So the ATS hasn't changed a lot over the last 40 years. But like as a little kid, my sister and I got paid like 10 cents for every licking and stamp of an envelope, as she would address them, like literally on the phone, like talking and putting the address on. We would stuff the envelope in and do it all. And we would have the TV on with no sound. And so I tell people, like, I was raised by listening to recruiting, conversations and screens. And then went to college, thought I would never work for my mom. I was going to be a school teacher, and met a girl from Nebraska who wanted to be a physical therapist. She applied to school in Michigan, and my mom's company was, going through a growth mode. And she's like, "Oh, well, I have this role for a research assistant. You should come work for me." I had no idea what that was. Turns out that was a sourcer. So I was sourcing for recruiters, and then moved my way up, eventually got my master's in HR, and said, nope, I'm going to go and do this corporate thing. And I kept getting pulled into recruiting on the corporate side, because I would go to, you HR people, you go to meetings, you have some hiring manager complaining they can't find talent and recruiting's not helping. And I was like, oh, you should do this and this and this. And then somebody like the CHRO would go, hey, can you run recruiting? and then I just kept going back and forth, jumping back and forth from, HR. Cause I really loved, people say, well, oh, what do you like more? And I'm like, I love the HR side of our world, but I also was really fascinated and loved the recruiting side. So, I was I was head of TA for a large health system in Michigan, where my mom had some health problems. And this is about a decade ago. And she's like, hey, I think I'm going to sell the company, or would you want to come back and run it? And so I've been doing that. Now, ironically, almost the exact same time my mom asked me to come back and run the company, I met Chris Dunn, who was writing HR Capitalist, Fistful of Talent. And that was early in blogging. So it's probably about more 12 or 13 years ago. Like, and he was just like, oh, you should write for me. And so I started blogging right around the same time. And a crazy thing happens when you start writing on the internet. People think you know something. And so then they ask you to come speak at conferences and write books and do all this stuff. And I'm like, like Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, also wrote on the internet. I don't think that really tells us anything.
There between value and producing content, right? Not necessarily.
Yeah, I think it's gotten worse over time. But and then Chris actually was the one, because at first I just started writing for Fistful of Talent once a week. He had put me on Fridays, and the whole thing was, hey, dude, just go make fun of what we do in the world and just have fun with it. And so that's what I did. It was more therapy than actual content development for me. And at some point he was like, look, you got a lot to say. Let's start your own blog. And he challenged me for 1 year to write every day during the week, like Monday through Friday. That was 12 years ago. I've been writing every day for 12 years. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I sit here and I'm staring at blank sheets of paper, right, on my computer, trying to get the rest of the chapters for my book done. And you're telling me you write every day for 12 years. That's just not right.
Well, the funny thing, Barbie, too, was like people would tell me like, oh, you need to write a book. And I'm like, I write blog posts. I have over 2 million words written in blog posts. Like, why do I need to write a book? And the moment that the book launched, I had all these people reaching out going, oh, now you should we want you to keynote. And I'm like, you've never asked me to keynote before. Like and there's like the book thing is so weird because people think like somehow you level up as a content producer, author. And it's difficult, right? It's not easy to write a book and produce, 60, 70,000 words in one kind of sitting. So, I mean, again, there's not a lot of people get to that point where they can do that, but I'm also kind of like, hey, it's not that big of a deal. Like, calm down from that standpoint. So
it is true, though. The book is a game changer, which is why I keep pushing myself in that direction. I actually have an organization who shared with me that they love everything I do. All my content is amazing. They want to bring me in as a keynote, but they can't do it until I have a book. I'm like, what? She goes, yeah, that's our policy. We bring people in once a quarter to speak to all of our employees, but we only bring people in who have a book. I'm like, will my infograph work? They're like,
I know.
Will this article suffice? No. All right, fine. So totally get the book thing. All right. So speaking of the book thing.
Yes.
There's so much in here. And, as in anything, the change and evolution is inevitable, right? And I say this all the time, and it's part of what I've written as the 5 imperatives for HR professionals is, agility and adaptability is absolutely imperative for success in the work we do. And failure to adapt causes, audience, does anybody know the answer? I ask this question all the time. Somebody out there has to know. I'm not going to answer it yet, but failure to adapt causes blank. Do you know, Tim? Science.
Failure to adapt causes chaos? I don't know.
No. In the world of biology, right? Failure to adapt.
I didn't know there was going to be a test, Barbie. I didn't study. See, like, why do you do this?
Extinction. Failure to adapt causes extinction when we think about species and adaptation and that kind of thing. But the same applies to the world of business. And how many companies existed? Blockbuster, Kodak, all these, we had major organizations out there who we thought would be here forever.
The one I love the most right now is BlackBerry. When you think about, they were 20 billion in sales 2 years after the iPhone launched, and now they're literally non-existent. Crazy.
Right.
Ellen, you're smart.
Yeah. Ellen, thank you. I never had a BlackBerry. I went straight from like the flip phone to the iPhone.
BlackBerry Pearl was my jam. Oh my God, I love it. I couldn't wait to get a BlackBerry.
I know everybody was so excited about those things, but never had one. But so when we think about that concept of failing to adapt, causing extinction, I think you really captured a lot of that sentiment, whether you use those words or not, in your book, because you recognize that what worked for us in recruiting and TA 10, 15 years ago, 5 years ago, and even with COVID 2 years ago, may not serve us as it did before. And so and there's definitely some things within the book I want to ask you about. But if you were to say, here's 3 things or 5, whatever number you choose, but to say to TA teams today to help them kind of really clarify the why of the work they do and where their focus might need to be to remain competitive, where would you guide folks?
First and foremost, I think marketing and advertising work, and they work really well. We are talked into buying crap we don't need every single day of the week. Just take a look at my Amazon inbox or basket. And so, but we tend to be really weak at that as a recruiting team overall, right? We think that our branding and our recruitment marketing and all this stuff really centers around this career site that we have. We spent all of our effort and energy and most of our resources there, versus using programmatic technology and things of that sort to say, hey, how do we just advertise way better? I mean, that's half the battle, is just saying, I always tell people their career site is kind of like a billboard that your company would have for your products or services out on the highway. But instead of putting it out on the highway, you put it behind your building, and then you would like force people to go find it. Right. And so it's not a really great avenue to advertise being in a career site. You have to have a career site. Yeah. Does it have to be great? Yeah. But like, we can calm down on this. We get sick of our own career sites way faster than anybody else does. It's like, oh, well, it's 3 years old. And you're like, yeah, but most people are seeing it for the first time. They don't care,
Right. No, they don't.
But actually getting out and putting job postings to where people can find them. And that doesn't mean that it's like, oh, well, we're just going to put them on Indeed, LinkedIn, Zip, places like that. That's where job seekers are looking. What about all those people who aren't looking? Where are we putting those? And I think that's where programmatic helps us. So I think just being flat out, number one, would be better at job advertising.
I love that. Let's pause on that 1 second, because I just had this conversation. So I'm as I mentioned to you as our pre-show conversation, I'm working on a total TA transformation with a multi-billion-dollar organization, and they haven't to date done any recruitment marketing, none. It's post and pray, right? And so having a conversation of, we need to lean into programmatic marketing. And because of COVID, we also need to embrace, because it's not going to change anytime soon, dollars speak to job boards. So if you want that post to get more visibility, you have to pay for it. It is what it is. It's a pay for play market right now. And if you don't recognize that and participate, you will be so far down on the search list that nobody's ever going to see that job that you have, unless they know exactly what they're looking for.
Yeah. Now, Appcast just had, so I was talking with one of their economists, and their own data shows that there's a 58% increase in programmatic spend by organizations just to get the exact same traffic they had pre-pandemic.
Yes. And what I want you to do is explain to folks what programmatic means, because I know what it means. I spend a lot of my life explaining what it means. So I'd love to hear your interpretation of it, because this seems to be something that is a very difficult concept for some folks to understand. And I'm not sure why. So maybe you can explain it better than I can.
Yeah. So I try to, and to me, I break it down very simply. So for me, programmatic is simply the aspect of having a robot algorithm technology place your job ads for you the moment that potentially one of those candidates is actually looking, right? So, and I'll do it like I'm a shoe person. I love shoes, and I'll go on Nordstrom's and I'll be looking at shoes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my wife's going to kill me if I have another pair of shoes show up at the house this week. And so I'll leave Nordstrom's and I'll go to CNN or ESPN or any site I go to, right? And there's that stupid ad for those shoes I just looked at, and it's just mocking me constantly over and over and over again. And eventually it wears me down, and I click and I buy the shoes and they show up. Job advertising is very similar in terms of programmatic, because that's all that is. Programmatic technology for marketing has been around for decades. Yep. We've just recently, I'd say in the last 5-8 years, have been using this in job advertising. It does the exact same thing. It doesn't just go post an ad on LinkedIn or post an ad on ZipRecruiter or post an ad on Indeed. It'll go on to Facebook. It'll go on to wherever people visit. Yes. And people will go, well, how do I know? How does it know that the person that's on Facebook right now is a nurse and I have an ad for a nurse? And I'm like, well, that's the magic of programmatic, is based on this person's social exhaust and where they visit and who they are. It pretty much knows who all of us are. It knows, that I'm a recruiting talent acquisition person that looks at a lot of TA technology. And those are the programmatic ads that it fishes to me based on my search history, based on the sites I go visit, all of that stuff. And so what this does is, we're using technology where we're saying, hey, here's the job openings I want posted. The technology goes out and posts them in front of candidates the moment they're there, literally in milliseconds. And then if those candidates apply, we get charged based on apply, not based on click rate for most of these programmatic engines, which is helpful. So you might say, well, gosh, I can go on Indeed and I'm only paying 25 cents a click. But, I can go on with something like an Appcast or, Job AdX, or there's a lot of them out there, and I'm paying $12. That's so much more. I can't afford that. You're like, yeah, but you're paying for someone that actually applied, not someone who just looked at your ad. Right.
Yeah.
And so there's a difference there. But what we see is probably a 30% decrease in overall spend for the same traffic, or like around a 30% increase for the same traffic or for the same spend. So it's just more efficient, better way to do it. And you can, what I like about it is you can set parameters. So if you have a job posting that you go, oh, we're definitely going to get applicants. We always get applicants for this one. Well, then just turn it off and you don't pay. Or if you say, hey, after we get 5 people apply, then bam, it turns off and we don't have to, pay anymore. So for me, the programmatic testing is we should do. Now, the hard part is it's right to this point, and I think we'll start to see technology that'll be a little bit more specific for SMB mid-enterprise. Most programmatic players don't really play with you unless you're spending around $5,000 a month or more, right? In enterprise, that's not a big deal. Those people are spending, 6 figures, a month, and it's kind of crazy. But for a lot of SMB enterprise, they're like, wait a minute, there's no way possible I'm spending 50 or 60,000 on job advertising in a year. And at that point, it's hard for you to take advantage of programmatic. Then you have to use, like, ZipRecruiters is a great one, who their entire engine as well is based on programmatic. So you'll get a little bit of programmatic flavor using a technology like ZipRecruiter. So
I think Smart Recruiters is doing some of that these days too.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that I like to do with programmatic is when you may not necessarily have a specific job, but you want pipeline building, you want your brand to build so that when that perfect job pops up, they're aware of who you are. It's also important to identify the different types of people who you want to hire, right? And we call them personas, and I'm sure you've done this work before many times, right? And what I think is so important about this piece is the work, the upstream work that has to happen for the programmatic to be impactful and effective, is that identifying, in your workplace today, who are your top performers, who are your middle, and who are your low? And what are some of the commonalities and traits and behaviors of those people? So I use this example often when I say, you're hiring engineers and IT folks. Is there a common theme? Go ask your team, right? Like, identify who your top 10 performers are and ask them, what do you guys do for fun outside of work? Are they gamers? Do they go and watch football? What are the things that are important to them? Because programmatic can also serve up your brand information to them when they're in that moment of playing that game and an ad comes across. It could be, hey, Tim Sackett, do you know about his amazing book? We think you might be interested in this, right? So there's the targeting and retargeting piece that you were talking about when you look for the shoe and then they retarget you that shoe over and over and over again. But there's also these messages that will organically float in to where you are in your ecosystem. You can also do geofencing, right? So if you're looking for people who watch football and there's an NFL game in your city, you can create an imaginary fence around that geography. And while those people are within that space, your ads are going to pop up when they open and post to Instagram or Facebook or what have you. So programmatic can be game changing in multiple different layers and levels, depending on your investment and your strategy and what you're trying to do with it. And so many organizations completely miss this part.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, Barbie, you bring up the geofencing, geo-targeting piece of this, which is next level, I think, TA stuff. Not a lot of people get involved with this, but think of, hey, you're in a city and a mile down the road is a major competitor, a giant facility they have, 5,000 people at. You can put a fence around there where every time someone turns on their phone, you are targeting them with your job advertising. And again, it's a little big brotherish. It's a little, rifle approach to go after right talent, but the same thing. I've seen it work really well at job fairs, at universities, at conferences. Like we see that all the time. People are geo-targeting, geofencing on conferences.
Yep.
And really, if you're out there trying to hire hourly people right now, the geo-targeting approach of saying, hey, what we know, all the data shows us that the hourly workers, for the most part, around 90%, are only about a 15-minute commute from your place of business, right? So you have to start very close, a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, 4 miles, and you start going out, circle, to say, hey, how do we actually get those people who are really close to us? It's not about the best talent for some of those jobs, because you can teach people. It's about who's going to show up. And it turns out if they're close, they're probably more likely to show up. Right.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's just so much you can do with it. And once you get the concept, but I think the key, and correct me if you disagree or you have another approach, the key to it being successful is everything you do before you launch it. Know who you're trying to target, know why you're trying to target them, know what your value is to them. So why should they care, right? If you go into programmatic without having that identified on the front end and that strategic piece mapped out, you may not get the surgical return you're looking for, versus just because in a way it's a scatter shot, but you can really narrow it down into that surgical piece if you do it the right way. And that's just one element of the amazing information that Tim shares with us. So I want to go to another piece, or I'm sorry, I cut you off. I asked you for 2 or 3 things. Let me finish. Sorry.
So so I think the second thing for me is really getting it down to having almost a zero frictionless apply, right? So we tend to think about how all the information that we need, how do we force an applicant to go down this path, this journey to get what we need, versus what do we really need? Well, all I really need is their interest and a way for me to contact them. So it's like, hey, how do we get one click apply? And then that's it, right? And then we'll take it from there. And as we both kind of show mutual interest, we'll gather those things that we need. But so often I find most TA shops, what we know is that if we really kind of take a look at their website traffic, most organizations, after like the 3rd click you make somebody go through in a process, they're losing about 60% of their applicants, right? So it's not that you need more applicants, you need to capture more of the applicants that are there that you don't even realize you're using. And part of that is your crappy apply process and your journey that you want to make them kind of go down. And I always tell people, it's kind of like the Tootsie Pop, right? How many licks does it take to get to the center? In this analogy, you want 1 lick. you want to get them as fast as possible to say, hey, I'm interested, and then let me jump through the hoops for you, versus the other way around. And so many organizations just build process to the point where then they want to scream they have no applicants. And you're like, yeah, because no one smart is going to go through this crappy process that you've made them kind of do, right?
I can remember it's about 10 years ago implementing an ATS with an organization. I was working there and we were building out the application, and we had, some senior executives, because we wanted everybody to feel like they were a part of it. And they're like, we need to capture, the name of their first pet and like the street they lived on when they were 5, like every possible data point. And I asked, I said, why are we doing that? And this was the mentality. If they're not willing to spend the time to complete our application, then we don't want them, because that shows their level of interest and dedication. Exactly. And that's pretty much, well, that wasn't quite the gesture I was thinking, but it was something similar. And, we have to change that mentality. And I'm dealing with it even today with some of the clients I'm working with. Guys, this is classic. About making you happy as the TA person or the HR person or the hiring manager. We have to create a process that is intuitive. Employees and candidates want a consumer-like experience. Imagine if you went to Amazon and had to click 10 different things to place an order. You wouldn't do it.
Yeah,
right.
It has to be definitely the consumer-like experience, I think, is huge right now. And I think people trying to figure that out struggle. But then when you tell them, like, let's talk about, you having to order an Uber or you having to do whatever, like, what is that experience? You're like, oh, I just kind of like click that I want to ride and it shows up, and you're like, bingo. Now, how do you
Right.
do that for a candidate, right? What does that look like from that standpoint?
Exactly.
So I think it's super important, that we can get to that piece. I think the third thing for me, and then we can kind of move on, would be getting back to the core of recruiting, which is making people feel wanted. And I have a great example. So we were working with a manufacturing client. Hourly workers were ghosting for interviews, and then even ghosting for jobs, right, to show up to a job. And so we just started using kind of simple text nurture campaigns where somebody would say, hey, I'm going to show up on Friday for this interview. And we would just start to go down and send them a text every day. The first day would be like, oh my gosh, Barbie, I know I told you a time for the interview, but I can't find it anywhere. Can you just text me back that time? Again, it's all it is a call to action. I know the time, but I want to make sure they're still invested, right? Next day, text message coming from, the hiring manager saying, oh my gosh, Barbie or Tim just sent me, your information. I can't wait to meet you on Friday. You look amazing. This is going to be a lot of fun. Like, bam, that's it. No call to action. Next day, oh my gosh, Barbie, I'm so stupid. I forgot. Can you just send me a copy of your license for our security team? Call to action. Because if they don't answer, something's wrong, right?
Right.
And so we went from a manufacturing facility that was having 70% ghosting down to 10% ghosting by just having a simple nurture campaign set up. And when we interviewed all these people afterwards, and we said, hey, why did you show up for this interview? And across the board, it was, I felt like this company wanted me more than anybody else. And they would go back and talk about the messages and how, like it was every day. I got it. Like they were texting me and communicating with me. And that never happens in our world. To them, that was real. To us, it was a bot that was doing all of it. It was a simple nurture campaign that we clicked go. It's a 5-day interview cycle. It's a 4-day interview cycle, 3-day, whatever it is. And we had them all built, and it was just start it and go and leave it be. Right. And then as soon as somebody didn't do a call to action, obviously the red flag clicks to the recruiter to go, hey, you got to get back into the loop here and find out what's going on. Because what we know is a hiring manager is much happier to tell me when I tell them, hey, cancel that interview Friday at 10 a.m. We had someone that just dropped out, versus Friday at 10 a.m. there's a no-show, and then they're looking at me like I'm the idiot.
Right. For sure. Sure. And that communication loop between you as the recruiter and the hiring manager is so critical, right? Keeping them as informed as they need to be so that there's so many elements to that where I see gaps today where recruiters are so busy, and I get it. They're so busy, right? Especially now. There's just so much happening. But when we neglect to communicate, we start to erode trust. We start to, in the absence of information, people make it up for themselves, or they go hunting for it. And that creates even more chaos. And then the communication loop just spirals out of control because nobody took ownership. So I love what you said, right? Is just giving them that heads up that, hey, that they didn't respond, we're canceling the interview. And that gives you your time back. Or if we can get another candidate qualified into that spot, we're going to do that too. Right?
It changes the perception of that hiring manager to you as a recruiter, right? You look like you have control of what's going on, right? Which I think is that's different from what they've had before, because you would just be like, well, I have 5 people showing up for you on Friday and 2 show up and you look like a moron. And this person wasted in their whole day waiting around for people not to show up. It doesn't mean that people won't show up and ghost you. They still will. Our job is to try to eliminate as much of that as we can. It brings up one last thing. And then you and I can talk about this because I think it's really data driven, because you had made a comment and I kind of like rolled my eyes about recruiters being so busy. I don't think most talent leaders really know if their recruiters are busy. They're being told they're busy and they're acting like they're busy, but we don't know they're busy, because when I go in and I start to measure the funnel, I'll find some recruiters who are busy, and I'll find some recruiters who are filling their weeks on LinkedIn doing nothing but sending emails with no response. Right. And so you go, and people always go, well, what data should I measure? And I'm like, well, stop measuring hiring manager sat, stop measuring days to fill, stop measuring stuff that has no correlation to TA team success. Measure your funnel. And they're like, well, that seems like you're micromanaging. I'm like, well, no, I need to know as a leader the capacity of my team. what in a capacity of an individual, so that when my CEO comes in and says, hey, in the second quarter, we need to increase our hiring by 250, I can go, shut up, you're an idiot. There's no possible way we can make this to happen. And then they'll go, what? You're fired. And no, so don't say shut up to your CEO. But you have to go, wait a minute. There's no way we can do this. And here's why. Let me show you the data. If you want to make this happen, here's the resources I need to make it happen. I need another 50 grand in programmatic. I need 3 contract recruiters. I need blah, blah, blah. I need interview slots for all these hiring managers who are not giving them to me. All the, that funnel activity allows me to have these strategic conversations. And it also, on the recruiter side, allows me to actually have a developmental conversation. Because if I have a recruiter who's hitting certain things, and all of a sudden, but let's say they're hitting all their goals for submittals and screened candidates, but they're not getting interviews, there's a quality issue there that we have to help them with, right? Or if they're getting a bunch of interviews but no hires, again, let's go back and say, hey, you're not really aligning with this hiring manager well, right? Let's go back and dig into this. So it's not using it as a hammer, it's using it as, how do we make you better in your job? And I think too often we miss all of that. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, not at all. No, absolutely. What my question was, because it's funny that you say that, because I have the book open and it's sitting here to pages 128 and 129 about, measuring the quality of the TA product. But yes. I want to go to what you said about investigating your pipeline, right? And measuring your pipeline. Talk about how you do that, because there's different ways, and I've
sure.
built reports to do it, and I'm sure you have as well. So I'd love to know, what is your take on how do you measure a recruiter's pipeline or the quality of the work that recruiter is doing?
So to me, it's all ratios, right? Most shops, I mean, if we take a look at every single company that hires at every single position from the highest to the lowest, most shops run a 6-3-1 kind of shop. It's 6 candidates that you're going to screen to a hiring manager. They're going to choose 3 to interview. They're going to hire 1. Again, that's very broad data, but almost all shops at the end of the day run like a 6-3-1. And so then you start to look at ratios. If I know it's a 3-3-3 ratio or 30% ratio, 33% ratio, to get my 6 screen candidates, I have to have 25 apply, or whatever the funnel is for you. You can start taking a look at those ratios and get very specific around what you can actually produce and not produce, and also what recruiters are not producing for you, because you can actually break that out into entry-level positions, mid-career, hard to fill tech, executive roles, whatever that might be. And the funnels are very similar, not from level, but from recruiter to recruiter within that specialization, right? And so now you can start to really compare and say, wait a minute, why does Barbie have so many more hires than Tim? Well, let's take a look at their funnels. Well, shoot, Barb screens twice as many people in a week that Tim does. So it turns out, and I see this in my own shop. We'll have a new recruiter come in, they'll start to fail, and we'll go and we'll challenge them. We're like, for 4 weeks, for 1 month, we're going to increase your screen candidates by 25%. And at the end of that month, magically, they're a better recruiter.
Right? Crazy how that works.
And they're just because they want to argue with you. No, it's quality versus quantity. And I'm like, no, it's both. And I expect both. I expect that you're going to find really good people and you're going to find enough of them. And when you put those things together, you become really good at your job. It's not one or the other. If you find really good people, but you only find a few, well, guess what? You're only going to have a certain level of, success. And so, And so I think there's a lot of, again, you can just flat out, most ATSs now will help you measure the funnel. And if you don't, especially if you're enterprise and you're using, Workday, Oracle, SAP, you can layer in middleware like Gem or a lot of the, CRM technology, Eightfold out there that will actually measure that for you as well for your recruiters. And you can build dashboards. I know I work with a lot of enterprise clients using Workday that use Power BI or Tableau, and they're working with data analytics. So it's one of those people that if you run an enterprise shop, you better be hiring some data experts on your team to build this stuff out for you, because to me, it's invaluable. You couldn't have it. I would not run an enterprise TA shop today without having at least one business analyst sitting in the desk right from me, like, or we're having a daily, like that. That's so critical to what that is. When it was funny, I was at HR Tech 2 years ago. I think it was three, like whenever we were in person last, and I had 3 enterprise TA leaders, and I said, besides your core ATS, what's the next technology you could not do without? And they all said their business intelligence tool. That was number 2. It wasn't a sourcing tool. It wasn't an interview tool. It was business intelligence.
Yeah, and that's missing in a lot of TA spaces today, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think it's anyone's fault. I think it's a lack of understanding and a lack of sophistication when you think about how, especially the small and mid-sized companies, you're the HR person, you're the TA person, you're the one size fits all person. And there's not even an awareness that some of this exists that can help you so significantly. So I'm hoping these types of conversations bring awareness to the forefront as well. Because
Barb, I constantly talk with like the ATS product managers, right? That are building out our ATSs. And I'm asking them, why are you not putting in like really robust recruiter metrics for TA leaders to be able to actually really analyze their impact of the team and the quality of their team? And it's constantly like, well, they're not asking us for this. I'm like, yeah, because they don't know it's available, that what you can do for them. Like if you build it, they will come kind of thing, right? It's not always, it's not, I mean, again, I love that. Workday is a classic example. They listen to their customer base and do all kinds of things, right, to try to figure out what features that they want. But sometimes a lot of these enterprise players listen too much, and they're not saying, okay, hey, we hear you and we're working on some of this stuff, but you know what? There's stuff you really need that you don't even know you need, and we're going to build that as well, right?
Yeah, I have a couple things I'd like Workday to build. So if you have a great contact over there, send them my way. So on page 128 and 129, you have a formula on here where you talk about measuring the quality of hire. And I love, it's very visual. So for folks who are visual and for folks who like word problems, you got it both ways here. So talk to me a little bit, or all of us, about why you think this metric is so important, because oftentimes we don't measure this, right? We measure fill, all the the pipeline,
sources, all that good stuff. Yeah.
Right. And referrals, how many are all that stuff. That really, what does that tell us? Sometimes I wonder, why do we even measure it?
But really, sometimes if you're a really inefficient shop, days to fill and some of that stuff can help you become more efficient. But if you're already efficient, getting slightly more efficient actually might be hurting you, not helping you in terms of a quality of hire, right? Sometimes you're hiring too fast and you're not actually waiting for the right person to come to the top of the funnel kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there's no correlation between team success and days to fill. Like that's just a misnomer. We just think faster is better. And so we always try to get faster. And most of our TA teams out there will have like annual bonus goals based on reducing their time to fill, you know. And again, there's definitely some pieces and positions where you go like, oh, a salesperson, or, hey, we need, certain people within positions that, are revenue driving, that, hey, the longer it takes, that we're missing out on revenue. I get all of that. But that's not the majority of what we do. So to me, it's kind of a worthless metric. I will tell you that I also don't believe quality of hire is a TA team metric, but it is a talent acquisition health metric for the organization. Ultimately, here's what I'm thinking. Bigger picture, at 5,000 feet, our job as talent acquisition teams and leaders is to increase the talent within the organization. The only way you do that is if you replace somebody with another person. That person should perform better than the person they replaced. That's quality of hire.
Right.
What I find is so often TA teams will measure quality of hire as, oh, somebody stayed 90 days. So that must have been a great quality of hire. And I mean, like, that has nothing to do with quality of hire. That's tenure, right? That's turnover. That literally has nothing to do. Now, what I think what they're trying to do is quality of applicant, which is, hey, if I send a hiring manager 10 applicants, what percentage of those 10 applicants should they want to interview? That's quality of applicant, right? And I always tell people, like, they're like, well, what should that be? Should that be 30%, like a batting average for like baseball? And I'm like, if you sent 10 candidates that you screened to a hiring manager and they only wanted to interview 30% of those, you're a failure as a recruiter. They should want to interview 100%. Now I'll give you 90 because they might, like, oh, Barb went to Michigan and I hate Michigan, whatever. Like, who knows, right?
There's learning curve, that kind of thing. But
there's a learning curve. But if you have a great relationship with your hiring manager, it should be a 1-to-1 ratio in terms of people I send to. Now we know that's not the case. But again, you should strive for that. So it should be in the high 60s, 70s, 80s though. And that's a quality of applicant measure that I think you should really be pushing, because if you have a recruiter who's working with a certain function in your company and you're seeing a 20 or 30% quality of applicant, you have a problem with that recruiter, right? And it might not just be the recruiter, it could be the relationship, could be a lot of things, but you better dig in. Quality of hire is really, this is a long-term metric that takes it could be 6-month performance, annual performance. And what I say that's not a TA measure is because you didn't select the person to get hired. You're not training them, and you're not measuring their performance.
Right.
Is TA owns a piece of that. You help find the person, but like two-thirds or 75% of that's really on top of the hiring manager for quality of hire. So should you measure quality of hire? Heck yes. But you have to have your executive team understand that that's a health metric for the organization and talent. That is not a measure the TA team owns.
And part of me thinks we should even change what we call that, because so much of that is based on, you could have a really crappy leader, right?
Yeah.
And
for
they
sure.
say all the right things and they want the top talent, but they bring them in, and we see this all the time. We want them to be innovative and creative and independent and blah, blah, blah. And then we bring them in and we micromanage the hell out of them until they're like, peace out, I'm done. So we see this all the time. Well, that's not a reflection on TA. That's a reflection on that leader or their inability to properly lead. So sometimes I think we need a different label for that particular measure, because it really isn't quality of hire. The quality of hire can be measured at the time that person is hired. Did they meet your expectations? Do they have the qualifications? Like, that is the quality of the hire and the hiring process. Then it's our absorption, right? And that type of thing. And how do we measure that? And what does that look like? So I agree. We've got to shift where some of that belongs.
Yeah, I do like hiring manager batting average for hiring managers who hire, let's say 10 or 12 or more, kind of a year. Like, they're more high volume hires, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it could be hundreds, whatever. But that's back to their selection proficiency. And so if you take a look at, and you can do this at 90 days, 6 months, a year, it really is telling at a year, right? So if a hiring manager makes a selection of a hire and they're still there a year, they're batting 1,000, right?
Right.
And if you do this for all of your hiring managers in the organization, you'll see hiring managers batting 1,000, 900, 950, 850, right? Really good. And then you'll see ones that are like they're at 25, 35%.
Yeah.
Like, and you're like, wait a minute, let's dig it. Now, again, high volume, low volume does have an issue. But if you take a look at all of your high volume hires versus low volume, again, you'll see people where you're like, and it always hits us in the face where you're like, oh, of course, Barb's an awesome leader. People love her. That's why she has a 900. Oh, Tim's a moron and people hate him, and that's why he's got a 20. And you're like, well, but as an organization, we're like, why are we allowing Tim to hire then? And lead people and do all of these kinds of things. Like, I tell, one of the things I love to say is, like, the best hire that you'll ever make is the one you don't have to, is because you've been able to hold on to somebody. And when we start to measure hiring manager batting average and we take it to our C-suite and we show them, what you see is a change in behavior from your managers, where they'll go, well, I think I made a mistake on this hire, but I'm going to actually work with them and try to see if we can make it work, because I don't want it to show up as a negative. In this day and age, they should be acting that way, right? Yeah. You own this person. You made the decision. I didn't,
I love that perspective. And I also think we have to take that same kind of mentality of it is a partnership with the talent within our organizations. And what I see often, especially when we're in these transformation modes with a few of my clients, I'm sure you've heard this before. TA is blamed because we're losing $50,000 a day because I don't have any engineers on my team. And my first question is, oh, are you in a growth mode where you are creating a new team, or did all of your people leave? And they look at me and I'm like, well, if we have an organization right now and we're not in a growth space, and all of our hiring is attrition based, then there's a bigger question to be asked here. And the $50,000 a day that you're losing because you don't have enough engineers is not necessarily a TA issue. That's a retention and a leadership issue. So let's reframe where we're throwing the blame, because you can't pressure your way out of that by hiring faster, because then the quality of that candidate is going to go down and down and down, because all you're worrying about is speed, right? So it becomes this very, very toxic catch-22.
100%. You cannot hire yourself out of a crisis. You have to be able to hold on to really good people at the same time as you're trying to backfill positions that are there. You know, and that people they struggle to really understand that it's not, well, we're going to get everybody hired and then we'll work on retention. No. These are two parallel things working simultaneous.
Yes. And, you know, I don't find any of it, and maybe I'm minimizing this. So again, anybody in the audience can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think anything that is involved in the TA process is rocket science, but it does take strategy and consistency and continuity and continual auditing. That's another element that I see missing pretty frequently, is that I think you said before, we put our careers page up, right? And are we auditing it to see, is it still relevant? Do you need to change it every 6 months? No. But you do need to make sure that the content is still relevant. Have you updated something? Do you have new leadership? Do you have whatever it is, right? A new product line, whatever. But I think we think, when we think about the old school, and I use that term loosely, but the old mentality of, we're going to roll out this new process, and then we just kind of leave it there for an indefinite period of time, and we're not doing that continuous improvement. So applying that kind of agile mentality to the work we do in TA is critically important, but I don't see that happening a lot.
No, and I'm a huge fan of constantly A/B testing. I came out when I ran TA for Applebee's. One of the things I loved about them was, from a corporate standpoint, we had a people, a marketing, and an operations quarterly innovation summit where we had to do and try something new every single quarter, and we had then go ahead to present our findings. Right, what happened? So there was a pre-measure and there was a post-measure, and here's what we did, and then here's the adjustments we're going to make. And it was a constant push to become innovative and try things, right? And so for me, I think every TA and HR shop should be doing that, where you're constantly, instead of like building giant process and then bolting it on and telling people, here's what we're doing now, just take that idea and find one champion and try it with them. If it works, awesome. Let's roll it to some other people and try it. If it doesn't work, it was just a test. We just wanted to see if it would work. It didn't. No big deal. We're going to end it. Right. So to me, that's like the thing we don't do enough of.
We really don't. And if we can think iteratively, then we can get there, right? It doesn't have to be this one big bang where there's a switch that's flipped and all of a sudden TA is 100% different than it was yesterday. It's an iterative change, along with the technology that we use, the process changes, the different approaches. We have to also bring along behaviors and habits, and or change behaviors, habits, perceptions, and mindsets, which is the most difficult part of anything that we're doing, is that element. And by using your approach of, let's try this, you dismay a lot of those skeptics, because the proof is in the data that you show of, here's where we were, here's where we are, here's how we got there, versus, just poo-pooing these ideas constantly, right? So let's try it. What do we have to lose? We have nothing to lose.
The best thing you want is another hiring manager or functional to come to you and go, wait a minute, why is Barb getting to do that and I don't? You're like, well, it's just a test right now, but you're next. I'll put you on the list that you're next, right? When they're begging you for to trying the new stuff, right?
Yes, I love it.
You know, so, I wrote the book because we've been talking about that, but like there was one of the questions you had asked early on was like why do you write this book or whatever, and it was I got a chance to speak early on in my career of the speaking thing and writing thing. And I was so like freaked out about the really smart people in the audience. And let's call them the 1%ers. Right. Yeah. And so I got on stage and I tried to talk direct. I was like, I'm going to show them I know everything. I'm going to impress them. Turns out you can't impress the 1%. They already knew, they weren't even listening to me. They already knew more than me. They didn't care. And that's when it hit me, because it was the worst like presentation I think I've ever done. It was like the 99% of the people there that are in the weeds, that are struggling, those are the people I want to talk to. I don't need to talk over their head. I just need to talk shop with them. Right. And
Yeah.
that's, the book is, like you said, it's easy to read because it was written for that. It was written for the 99% that need it, not the 1% who don't.
That it's so true. Like I'm getting ready to order like 10 of these to give to a couple of the TA teams I'm working with right now. Because well, it's so validating for me, because I come in as a consultant and they're looking at me like I'm insane because I'm suggesting we make these changes, and they've just never done it. And I often see this when we have recruiters who are coming from agency recruiting into corporate recruiting. They just have, and it's not, again, it's not their fault. So please don't come at me for saying you can't make this transition. You can, but the variables are significant. Agency recruiting and corporate recruiting are absolutely not the same thing. And if you don't understand that relationship piece, that all of the internal mechanisms of the corporate piece that you don't have to deal with when you're in an agency, it's going to be a challenge. And so I find so much of this conversation and everything in your book so validating, because it makes me feel a little less crazy when people are looking at me like, you're pushing me too hard, you're pushing me too hard. And I'm like, no, you're just not freaking doing your job. Like, come on, guys. Some of this table stakes, and we've got to get people over that finish line to understand that if you will just try this differently, your results will be significantly different as well. And it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have 100%. To be that.
Yeah.
So we have a question from Francisco. Hello, friend. Good to have you here. And I know we're getting really close to time, but could culture alignment be a measure of quality of our hiring? I'll say I have concerns with that one, because I think we often, and I see this in every organization, we can so easily use culture alignment or culture fit, because culture alignment is a new way of saying culture fit, right? And Francisco, I know you and I know your heart, and I know that's not what you mean, but in reality, that's what hiring managers are going to do, and they're going to weaponize that as a way to dismiss people they just don't want to talk to, or they have some sort of bias about or prejudice for, and they lump it all into culture alignment, culture fit. That's my take. Tim, I'd love to your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I hesitate to walk away from culture fit. I think what we have to do is combine those. You have to find a culture fit with DE&I and B, and understand that, hey, I want a diverse team that also fits culturally with us, right? So if we put both of those things together and we really are measuring the data, ensuring that we're doing the right things, that becomes a better overall result. But to ignore culture fit and then just bring in diverse teams and think that they're going to start to work together and be happy and productive, that's a misnomer as well. It doesn't work like that. Mm-hmm. You have to have both, and you have to combine those.
Yes.
Is it difficult? Heck yeah. Super difficult, but it can be done. Yeah.
I think, to me, the difficult part of it is to get our hiring managers and our recruiters and everybody involved on the corporate side to be in touch with the reality of their culture. Right. So we have this aspirational idea of our culture, which is great. We should always be working to make things better. But the reality of our culture is often very different. And we disguise the reality by using terms like fast paced. What does that really mean? Does that mean we're going to work you into the ground 24/7? Or does it mean that we adapt to change very quickly? Two very different meanings to a simple phrase. So I think the key to that alignment is understanding what those words mean for your company, and making sure that you're as transparent as you can be with your candidates, because people will choose that, right? There are people who will choose fast paced because maybe they love that. Maybe they want to work, 7 days a week or what have you, right? So like you said before, if you build it, they will come. So identify what it is, start evangelizing that message, and the people with whom it resonates will respond. But don't call it a pretty pony when it's a broken down, sawhorse. That's totally different. And I use that analogy a lot, where I say to folks, there's Neiman Marcus and there's Walmart. Both have a place in the market, both have a place in the world. But you can't be Neiman Marcus and sell cheap plasticky crap for $1,000 that's going to fall apart before you get it home. And you can't be Walmart selling your cheap stuff, or, you be who you are. Know who you are, be who you are, embrace it, and be transparent about it. That's how you will attract the right folks to your organization. Looks like
Definitely.
we have other questions here. So quickly, we're at 1 o'clock. So I'm just going to do some rapid fire fun questions. I'll
Sure.
pull some other comments here just so that we can see them. But so chocolate or vanilla?
Vanilla.
Okay. Audiobook or hardcover?
I like both, actually.
Me too. I always order the hardcover and I listen to the book, so I get that.
I find it easier on a plane to do audio versus reading, especially with the AirPods. Like you can almost get immersed in that, right? And then if I'm at the beach, I'd like a book.
So funny. I do the same thing. I get motion sickness very easily. So reading is super hard for me if I'm in motion at all. So I do audiobooks and I listen to them in my car all the time. Okay. Beach or mountains?
Oh gosh. I actually, I love both. If I had to choose, I would do beach, but I love the mountains.
I'm the same way. Okay. Last question. East Coast or West Coast?
Oh, neither. Oh, I hate the coast.
Really? But you like the beach?
I'm in Midwest. Well, Lake Michigan. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
yeah. Great Lakes.
That's a perfect example of clarifying, right? To me, the beach is salt water, always.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I like saltwater beaches. I just hate the coast. So for me, I'm a Midwest person, right?
Okay. Awesome. That's great. This has been so amazing. We could talk for hours. And you know who wanted to pop in, but I don't see her on here, is our mutual friend, Miss Carmen Hudson.
Oh,
I know. I've known Carmen since 1995. And we both worked at Capital One together. And that girl has made me laugh more than probably any other human on this planet.
One of the smartest people I know in TA. Like she's ridiculously smart.
Yes, absolutely. She taught me so much and we remain close. She was actually a guest in February and I told her you were coming up and she was going to try to pop in, but I know she's incredibly busy with her new role. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Tim, I hope you'll come back. This was great because there's so much we can talk about, not only within the context of your book, but just in general. We should do like an after 5 version of our show.
Yeah.
Where we let everybody know, like, take the kids out of the room because this is going to
be
fun. But that would be really great. I've had so much fun talking to you today. Learned a lot, and just incredibly grateful that you've given us this time today. And everybody, if you want to reach out to Tim, you can go to timsacket.com. He's also very active on LinkedIn. His posts are hilarious. He's got a blog, as he mentioned. He's been writing every day for 12 years, which really makes me feel bad. But such great content, great guidance. And then if people want to hire you, what can people hire you to do, or your company?
Anything if the money is good. Like I'm like,
and below.
You know, I do a lot of things I start out with, especially with like enterprise TA teams, is kind of like a TA team audit. Now that sounds boring. Really what it is digging into seeing how you do things now. And then what would I recommend that you do? Like, what are the changes? Like, let's game plan this. Here's the first thing, right, that you need to kind of tackle and kind of do. And then from there, because there's what I find is that there's some stuff that you can get done in like the first 30, 90 days. There's stuff that's going to take probably a year, and there's stuff beyond that, right? And so, especially the bigger you are, it just takes a little bit longer. And so often they're trying to change everything at once, and it's like, no, we have to. There's certain things you need to focus in, and then there's other things that will come, and like this is just the way it's going to happen. Yeah. And then like I'm going to Chicago in a couple of weeks to meet with a TA team for their annual retreat meeting development stuff, right? Where I go in and we're going to talk about like recruiting performance and how to work with hiring managers. So there's a little bit of that I do as well, which is just kind of classic kind of speaking team, motivation stuff around TA teams as well. So those are probably the 2 biggest ways people hire me from that standpoint.
Wonderful. Well, I love that. And I may hire you to come in and do some auditing with me. I would love
Nice.
that. It would be great for me. And I'm sure I would learn a ton, as I'm doing a lot of similar work that you're doing. And I just haven't been doing it as long because I was a practitioner in the seat for 20 years. And now you get into the consulting space and it's a different game. It is a different game for sure.
Definitely.
So, exciting. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks, Sam. And you guys, we will post this on our YouTube channel, the Business of HR YouTube channel. We have a playlist called The Table where every episode is listed. We will also repost it to LinkedIn. Well, as soon as we end the broadcast, it shows up on LinkedIn as well. And again, we want to thank our sponsors, Daily Pay. We couldn't do it without their support, and it's incredibly appreciated. And I think that's about it. So stay tuned for next week. We will be here Tuesday at noon. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. All right. Get to hit the end.